This empty chair represents the addict who died today, not knowing recovery was possible.
Hi, I'm Phil Leahy, and I'd like to welcome you to a very special edition of The Empty Chair. Tonight I have 6 guests who all have, unfortunately, one thing in common. They all have a child who, unfortunately, does represent the empty chair. They've told their stories in the past. I've had some of them on my show. I'm sure you've seen some of their stories in the newspaper and at events that they've spoken at. And basically their story has always been on their child and, their life and their journey. Tonight, we'd like to kind of dig into a different aspect, something else that is just as tragic in the world of addiction, but unfortunately, I think a lot of times is ignored. And that being the surviving family members. When the addict passes, basically their suffering is over. But the families, well, theirs is just beginning. So we have a lot of guests and we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to start right off. I'm going to start in the back with my good friend Doug. Doug, why don't you introduce yourself, your daughter, what her name was, how old she was when she died, and how long it's been since she's passed.
My name's Doug Griffin, and my daughter Courtney passed away in September of 2014. She was 20 years old.
In 2014 she passed. Jim?
My name is Jim Zanfanya, and my daughter passed away in October of 2014. Her name was Jacqueline.
And how old was she?
She was 25.
And Gail?
My name is Gail Johnson, and my daughter is Kelly, and she passed away in January of 2015. She had just turned 18.
Just turned 18.
My name is Joyce Middlemiss, and my son Jeffrey passed away 6 years ago on November 20th, 2009. He was 30 years old.
Libby?
My name is Libby Strauss. My daughter is Hannah, and she passed away December of 2014. She was 21, almost 22.
And Betsy?
My name is Betsy Cody. My son Christopher died March 28th, 2013. He was 24 years old.
All right, and when I ask you a question, feel free, if you have the pictures of your child, and I see Jim has a recent one and one.
Very young one, yeah.
How old was she there, Jim?
She looks about 6 or 7 there, I guess.
6 or 7 years old?
Yeah.
Don't look like a drug addict to me.
No, I know. She was happy-go-lucky, dancing around, liked to wear funny hats.
Doug, this show is really about the aftermath. So, unfortunately, the aftermath starts when you found out that Courtney died of an... How did you find out? I mean, were you notified or...?
We had some company over the house. Some friends from Methuen were actually over for dinner. And we were watching pictures from the internet show up on your television now if you have Xfinity, and we were actually looking at pictures of Courtney. When we got a call from Courtney's boyfriend, who was in jail at the time, and somehow word had gotten to him that Courtney had passed. And he told me that she was gone, and I said, no, she was just in a car accident. She's fine. And he said, no, she's dead. And I hung up and called 911 to get the police because I couldn't believe that I would hear from her boyfriend like that. But that's how we found out.
And I know Jim was on my show also in the past. Unfortunately, you have a sadly unique way of the way you were informed. So how were you notified about Jacqueline?
I was coming home from my older daughter's house. She had been dog sitting because I was working and Anne Marie was away for an extended vacation at the Cape with some friends. And my son-in-law called me and said, Jim, has anyone reached out to you about Jackie? And I said, no. What does that mean, you know? He said, let me call you back, okay? That's what he said. And then he called me back later. And he said that he had gotten condolence messages on social media about Jackie. And he said from two or three different sources, which confirmed, I guess, the fact that she had died. And so I hadn't heard from the Flagstaff police because I hadn't gotten home yet. They had been to the house several times, but since I was not there and Anne Marie was not there, they were unable to reach us. So in this case, social media trumped the police.
Yeah, social media can be a valuable resource, but obviously it has its drawbacks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay.
Gail?
Well, it was New Year's Day last year, and I was in South Boston. My dad was doing the polar plunge, so I was there taking pictures of him, and on my way home, I received a phone call from a friend of Kelly. She had spent the night, New Year's Eve, at a friend's house. They were having a party, and I wasn't really concerned about this party because it was kids that were not using. So I was sort of comfortable with the situation. But so I received the phone call, and they said that from one of her girlfriends, and she said that Kelly had fallen asleep on the couch on one of her friend's laps, and they thought she was asleep and snoring. And they didn't recognize the signs of an overdose, so they had tried to revive her. They called 911, but she had been without, air or whatever for quite a while. So I rushed to the hospital, where she remained there on life support for 3 days until we received the CAT scan results that said that she was brain dead.
18.
18.
So sorry. Joyce?
It was a Friday evening, and I had just gotten home, and my phone rang, and Jeffrey's girlfriend was hysterical on the other line. They were at work, and she had been called down. They worked in the same place, and she had been called down to the warehouse. He had what they thought passed out anyways. She said he was on his way to the hospital, but she didn't know how he was. My husband was working, so I went and picked him up, and we rushed to Lawrence General, where we were brought into the back room, and the doctor came in and said they were still working on him. But they didn't know, and 2 minutes later, somebody else came in and said he had passed away. So.
I only found out 2 weeks before my daughter passed, December 14th of 2014, that she was even using heroin. She also suffered from mental illness, had bipolar depression, diagnosis since age 15, and had actually been in a Boston hospital for about a week and a half in a dual diagnosis facility, which means she's being treated for substance abuse as well as her mental illness. She was released, and 3 days later she was supposed to go to start a methadone treatment program, and unfortunately she couldn't stay away from the heroin, and she passed away at home. She was with her boyfriend, and the scene, he came out at 6 in the morning screaming, and I took one look, and rigor mortis had already started to set in. I just remember how ice cold her arm was, and so, EMTs, police came, of course, but, she was gone.
Betsy?
I came home from work to find my son dead.
Oh, that's right in your house?
Yep. And Same thing, I knew he was cold and he was blue. And I called 911, same thing, and they took him to the hospital, but he was pronounced dead right away.
You know, I know a lot of you, and obviously, this is where I get my plug for MVP ASAP, Merrimack Valley Prevention and Substance Abuse Project. Most of these people are all very active members in that community group. I know that, you know, my daughter OD'd and recovered, obviously. But I know even way back when and then up to now, and of course I've been dealing with this for 15, 20 years now. And even now, you know, a lot of times I think maybe that's why I enjoy talking to the schools. I always say to myself, if I knew then what I know now, could I have made a difference? And I always feel like I would have liked to at least had the opportunity if I had a little more education. You know, and anyone can start. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, personally, I think that if I knew then what I know now, I could have saved my daughter. She was smart enough to know that she needed treatment, and we sought it everywhere. And we couldn't get a bed. The insurance wouldn't cover it. And she knew she was going to die, and she told the hospital administrator, "This drug is going to kill me," and we couldn't get her treatment. You know, so it was a very sad end for us because.
So with what you've learned over the last year or so, you figure that maybe you've learned enough where you could have bypassed some of them obstacles?
Definitely. Well, you know, initially when you find out your child's an addict, you go and you Google, you know, and the ones who make the most money come up to the top.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
And you know, we didn't know what resources there were, and there wasn't the grassroots effort then that there is now.
Yeah.
Now there's thousands of people involved. You know, everybody knows what's going on.
Right.
You know? And I know that help's available in different states. You know, and back then I was trying to hide it from the world while I was trying to get her help at the same time.
Yeah, I know the
And that was now I would blow the whistle loud, you know, to save her life.
Do any of the others, do you initially, did you feel a lot of guilt?
Well, I think my problem was we didn't think of opiates at the time. Chris died in 2013, but he'd been using probably 5 to 6 years prior to that. Heroin was not out there.
Right.
And I mean, you know, he started with pot like all the other kids, but I mean, we never thought my child wouldn't do heroin. I mean, it wasn't in the vocabulary.
Right.
I didn't know the warning signs.
Yeah.
When he was high, I thought he was just smoking. I didn't know he was on opiates. I think now I would have realized and hopefully gotten him help quicker than we did. And the same thing.
So you think the knowledge you have now, if you would have had back then, would have maybe made a positive impact?
I would have got him help quicker or tried to. And also, like Doug was saying, I was going through insurance companies myself. I was hitting my head against the wall. There were no drug courts. There wasn't the help there is now, but also there was not the awareness.
Right, yeah, the awareness has come along. Anybody else have a take on?
I think that we were sort of aware of what was going on with Jackie a little bit. We did have an intervention at the house, but one of the basics is they have to want to help themselves, okay? They have to want to go to the hospital for treatment. We took Jackie to Hampstead Hospital. We had the insurance. We were ready to go. Unfortunately, she was over 18. You know, she was in her early 20s. She was over 18. She had to decide to stay there herself. She did not like necessarily the activity that was going on, some of the conversations and the questions. And I think it was Libby's daughter also, she was bipolar. And so she was Jekyll and Hyde, and if you got her in the wrong mood, okay, then she could just walk out on you. I think there ought to be some sort of forced hospitalization.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, okay? I mean, you know, there is and there isn't. I mean, in Mass, anyway, we have Section 35. But let me get your take on this. You know, and I hate to bring politics into it, but the political scene has played a big part in substance abuse. Governor Baker had recommended a 3-day mandatory involuntary treatment for those who OD'd and had to be brought by Narcan. I'm sad to say that he didn't get the support in the state houses to pass that. What's your take? and anybody. What do you guys have a take on involuntary treatment? For like what you just said, for those who won't go, I mean, I'm for it for the main reason that my daughter started her journey because when she OD'd, they had her down as a suicide, and they had to keep her for 3 days. She wanted to get out. I wouldn't sign her out, so she had to stay. That was the begin. So what's your take on involuntary treatment?
We took Jacqueline to the Merrimack Valley Hospital for one of the overdoses. She was, make a long story short, subsequently released, said she's not a harm to anybody else and she's not going to harm herself.
Right.
Okay? Guess what? Okay? You know, she did. Hampstead didn't say that, but again, I think that she was living at home. She was under our care, custody, control, if you will. So we should have, as parents, had some say in what treatment Jackie should have had. And I think that if she had gotten into the hospital, talked to different people, and seen some of her peers, perhaps, in the hospital, you know, might have changed her mind.
You're right. She might have had a shot.
Might have, yeah, exactly. Might have had a shot at changing things. Okay, but again, she had to have wanted to do it herself.
Yeah. Had any of you ever tried the Section 35 process? Betsy, you have,
We
huh?
did, yep. Didn't work at the time.
Huh?
Did not work.
No. And, you know,
But,
obviously...
I mean, as we said, I would have tried anything, though.
Yeah, you know, just so everybody knows, you know, I mean, and this is why, you know, you people that are at home, you people with young children that don't think this will ever happen to you, I mean, look at these people, and the best thing they can do for you is they're trying to prevent you from going through the misery that they've gone through and are going through. So, yeah, learn from what we all went through.
I'd like to add to that if I could.
Go ahead, Ryder.
If someone is brought back from an overdose with Narcan, it's clearly obvious that that person's out of control.
Exactly.
The reason the bill didn't pass is because enough people didn't call their legislators to insist that the bill be passed.
Yeah.
And the way to get bills through is to get involved. And if you have a kid who's involved with substance abuse, get involved, save their lives.
Gail, go ahead. And just jump right in.
Yeah, thank you.
We don't go on formalities here.
I had quite an experience with Section 35, as you probably know. Last December 5th, I had gone into the court to petition for an involuntary commitment of Kelly. She had just turned 18, maybe a week and a half prior to that. And when I went in there, she had been using for about a year, and she had been in multiple treatment facilities. And when I went in, I brought in a list of all the facilities she had been in, the dates and times of her overdoses, the hospitals that she was treated at. And when she went before the judge, she told the judge that she hadn't used since the summer, and he asked if she would be willing to take a drug test, and she refused, which I would have thought would have been a red flag to him. But given all the information that I provided the court, actually the court clinician didn't even examine Kelly. She came to me and she said, she doesn't look like a heroin addict. And I said, well, did you look at her arms? You know, and she said, I can't touch her. It's, you know, it's...
She doesn't look like a heroin addict.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a
So-
line.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you, boy, there's one line that I've heard before, and actually you don't look like the parents of heroin addicts, or at least what parents of heroin addicts are supposed to look like. I know everybody probably still has some anger. The anger you had in the beginning, has it shifted to somebody else, or do you not have anger? Joyce?
I don't know if I'd call it anger, I'd call it sadness. I mean,
Okay.
losing a child is not natural.
Right.
And how I look at it is my life is forever changed. I have 5 children, and when I'm asked how many children I have, I say 5, because I do. One is no longer with me, but the bottom line is it has affected every aspect of my life, as well as my children's lives, and I kind of look at life as before this happened and after it happened. And I've learned a lot in these past 6 years, and I like to think that I've become a better person, that my career is in teaching, but I feel like my son taught us a lot. And I've learned much about what unconditional love truly is. We dealt with this issue for many years. Jeff was in and out of places. I always refer to the fact that we probably could have sent him to Harvard for what it cost us in rehabs and all of those types of things.
Yep.
But what I do think that the bottom line is, maybe some people said that, you know, there's all kinds of people that give you all kinds of information, and you know, it's been 6 years for us. It was very different then, but that maybe we enabled him. But I do know that the one thing is, I never threw my son out of the house. I couldn't. He was not able to use in our house, and we always went into action if he was, you know, his girlfriend, if he had been living with his girlfriend or whatever, and came back home, then it was us as a family that worked to get him into detox or rehab. And so it was a family affair, so to speak.
Well, don't beat yourself up. In my day, I was probably the championship enabler of all time. If it wasn't for this lady over here, there's a good chance my daughter would not be alive. Because you do have to make some tough decisions. The tough decisions don't always work out, but you have to make them. Now, the rest of you, any anger built up still from
Yeah.
one place to another, or?
Well, I think, you know, the last year for me, because I didn't realize that she was using heroin until so soon before she passed away, I've been educating myself. So then there's anger at myself, probably because I missed all these signs.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And much of the behavior I kept, and I don't know if you had this experience, I kept thinking it was connected to her bipolar depression, but symptoms changed.
Yeah.
You know, but that can happen for people who suffer from mental illness. So there's that anger, and then just the things that she's missing out on. That,
Yeah.
you know, you're going about your day, and there's all of a sudden something that hits you, whether it was her friends graduating from college and all their posts on Facebook last year, or a best friend that had a baby, and you know, those are painful. you
Yeah,
know, and there's also
absolutely.
some anger.
You know, I have a daughter who's an addict. She'll be an addict for the rest of her life. I'll be the parent of an addict for the rest of my life. But I can only imagine, or maybe I can't even imagine, what you guys have gone through. But yet you're here, and I know you do a lot of things other than just sit here on a couch and talk about, you know, the terrible misfortune you've had. So I know most of you, I know a lot of you are in my group. I know some of you are on my subcommittees and so forth like that. So, you know, some time is moved on, and I know a lot of you have been actively involved, you know, not in just my group, but I know you had an event. I know you're doing amazing things. All of you, why don't you tell me, what are some of the things you're doing to kind of get you through this tougher period? I'll start with you, Doug, because I know you've been pretty active.
Well, after my daughter died, we decided that the only thing we really could do was to try to save, you know, other parents from this feeling. So we've been very active with in the press, especially. You know, a lot of television, newspapers, things like that. Public speaking. I think the thing that made me feel the best was going to the teachers' workshops at the Methuen High School. You know, and speaking to teachers that are educating children, you know, about the dangers and the signs and things like that, because they want to know. People want to know. They don't want to ask. They just want to know.
Right.
You know, so if we could somehow educate them without them having to ask us, that's would be a great thing. And no matter where I speak or what I do, the audience is people that have been affected already. And I'm just trying to get to the people that I can't reach. I want to get to the parents of the kids that don't think that they're going to use.
Yeah, amen to that. And I'm so hopeful, with the help of our friends from the Tribune who will advertise that when this show's going to be on and that, I hope with all my heart, because you know I have the same goal as you do, trying to, most of the places we do speak are people who already have been affected. And yeah, I mean, we want to help them, we want to help people in treatment, but the prevention is the big thing. And I know you and your wife is doing something amazing.
I was going to bring her up. I mean, Anne Marie has been amazing with her art, and she's done, I think, 6 or 7 portraits now. And I give great credit to the Tribune also for having articles in the paper. And I want to thank you for having shows such as this to make awareness out there, to let people know, and let parents know that they can stop this before it happens. But Anne Marie has, as you know, done a lot of paintings, and a lot of the parents who she's done the paintings for have said, that's the way I want to remember my son or my daughter, smiling back at me. It's like he's looking back at me, and I can see that, and that's a nice thought. It's cathartic for Anne Marie to paint. It's also tough for her to paint because of Jackie, okay? But she's getting through it. She's helping it, and she actually started a new website, okay, that's called Angels of Addictions, and she's going to have all these people's paintings on there, and again, maybe have some articles or whatever. But I think awareness, like Doug said, you've got to talk to people who think this can't happen to you, because it can, okay? These paintings that Anne-Marie is doing is the little girl, the little boy next door, okay, who somehow perhaps fell into the wrong crowd and says, oh, these are my friends.
Yeah.
Guess what? They're not your friends. They just say that they are, okay? And parents have to be aware. You talked before about track marks. Jackie was always cold her entire life, so she wore long sleeves. Guess what else that covered up? That covered up the track marks on your arm, okay? But you've got to be aware of that. You've got to know and think about that. You've got to look in their eyes when they come home at night. Are they glassy? What do they look like? Do they come home and not say anything and go right to bed? Do they not talk to you? Okay? There are telltale signs that you can teach yourself. Like Doug said, you go on the internet and you talk to other people. You talk to parents such as us, who've got the experience of what's happened. And you say, what did you see? What did you, notice? And, take it from there, because as you said before, it can happen to you.
Yep. Gail, how are you doing anything to help you through this process? I know I've read your story in the paper, but have you, how are you getting through this, especially where your daughter was so young?
Yes. I think right away my husband and I both talked about what happened. We were very open about how Kelly passed. And shortly after her passing, we did do an interview with Channel 5 on the heroin epidemic, and been very active in trying to change the Section 35 laws.
Right.
We've met with the Chief Justice, we've met with the Attorney General, and given them some ideas that we think might help.
Boy, have I got a subcommittee for you.
Yeah?
It's called Legislative Involvement, isn't it, Margie? Huh? We will have a talk after this.
All right.
Betsy, I know you've been very active also, and I know you're trying to make some really positive changes.
Well, I talked to the 7th graders in the town I live in. I live in North Andover, and right now we don't really have drug education per se in town. So when Chris died, I knew the assistant superintendent, so I called him and said, can I speak to the 7th graders? He said, sure. And so I go into the health class and I talk to the 7th graders.
Yeah, I know.
I just try to prevent. I told them today, I said, you could be sitting in this chair, and they all look at me. And
I know I've gotten the opportunity to speak to school kids, recently. And out of all this stuff I've been doing all these years, I don't think I've ever enjoyed anything as much as, well, just like you were saying, talking to the schools and like that. It's just an awesome feeling.
so if I can just save one kid, that's my goal, to save that one child.
And Libby, I know you've done an amazing thing for the survivors of addicts.
Yeah, I think after the dust settles, you've had the funeral services and, the flowers and condolences stopped coming, and then you know, it's just sort of starts to, I don't know, be with you all the time and kind of close in. I did go back to work sort of gradually, but I also felt the need to connect with other families going through the same thing. And early on, I found out about the group GRASP, which stands for Grief Recovery After Substance Passing. And they have monthly meetings there. I go to 2 different meetings, different times of the month. For me, I live in North Andover, so I go to one in Lowell and one in Salem, Mass., but they're in other communities too. And they're enormously helpful. It's mostly parents that have lost their adult children, but in some cases it's siblings. It could be grandparents, aunts and uncles, boyfriend, girlfriend, and so on. And one of the groups is more active in getting involved in other awareness events. And through that, I participated in a film called If Only.
Oh, yes.
That was produced by Jim Wahlberg and the Mark Wahlberg Foundation and some others. And they needed extras for their final scene, which was at a church in Tewksbury. And so an email went out to us, members of the GRASP groups, and we went to help fill the church. And at the end of it, they allowed us, they had those of us who'd lost loved ones to have a photo of them, and they did stills of all of us, the families, with our loved ones and their names. So that I found, very powerful. And I'm working on trying to have our town show this film at the high school and the middle school. So that's kind of my next piece. I've joined Phil's group. And
Yeah, we roped her into a subcommittee too.
yes, I've also, I did attend a screening of this film at the State House last week with the House Subcommittee on Substance Abuse and Mental Illness. So, and Jim Wahlberg spoke there, and it's very powerful. I mean, it wasn't a large group, but I just feel like the more we can get the message
Well,
out.
on
the
that
better.
note there, in Lawrence, I believe it's March 5th, it's on a Saturday, they have an event down there. They run similar to the one we had in Methuen. And it's called the Time for Change. It's their 3rd event, and they will be showing If Only during that presentation.
Yeah. Well, it's been shown, I mean, it was meant to be educational. It's about a half-hour long. The theme is, 2 teens that start experimenting with drugs, and then they become addicted, and sort of their stories in a school, in a community setting. It's powerful. I've been in audiences with school kids, teenagers, and I think it's a good way, along with some other educational materials and a few speakers, to get a message across in a different way. And of course, we need the education in our schools, and luckily the governor has passed a bill to grant the schools money for that purpose. So we hope.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I out of all the things in that bill that were passed, I was pleased they put so much into prevention and education. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Joyce, I know the first conversation we had was when you invited me to speak at an event that you were having the same day I was at an event that I had. So we have gotten together since then. But why don't you tell us a little about something, because I am looking forward if you end up having that again, where we can, MVP ASAP can help promote it and so forth. But why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, when Jeff first passed, the first thing that we did was we started a scholarship at the high school that he attended. Jeff is the only one of my children that didn't go to school, but he went into the Navy. So we decided that was the first thing we wanted to do. And so since that time, we have given a scholarship to 1 or 2 kids going into college from Greater Lowell. And there's a great need because many of those kids can't really afford it. So that's been something, and it keeps Jeff's memory alive and in a very positive way. And I come from a family of educators. The other thing that we've done, and I really have to give the credit to my children. My two younger children are both coaches. They're both phys ed teachers, one in Lawrence and one in Methuen, and both coaches. My son is a JV coach in Methuen, and my daughter is the varsity girls coach in Methuen, and they did a basketball tournament the day of your event. And it was extremely successful. Wonderful. And they did a wonderful job. It went well, and our hope was to use some of that money. Maybe we weren't exactly sure, but what, as a family, we decided to do. We gave a girl a scholarship to the Haven of Hope.
In Methuen here,
yes. Yeah. And my daughter Jillian also gave money to Dean Bruder for transportation or something for the SAD group.
Yep.
So we're hoping that each year that we can do a little bit more with it. And, you know, we learned a lot in that time. We also learned that it was a bad weekend because we couldn't get, everybody was at your event, although Joe Solomon sent an officer over with the dog and all of that. And we did get Billy Fath to come and speak. Yes, I had never met him, but he did a wonderful job. It was very powerful.
Yeah, actually, he did an episode on our show also.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and because, again, I'm going to plug MVP ASAP, because of the way we're expanding, we have going to be reaching out to Joyce, and we're going to be reaching out to every community in the Merrimack Valley and across the border. And, you know, whenever they do have an event, we want to get behind it. We want to promote it. We want to provide resources and vendors and so forth like that, because you're all trying to get the awareness out there, and you're right. And again, I'm hopeful. See, a thing like you had, you're going to have a lot of parents coming, and that's the kind of event where you can sneak in a little education on substance abuse when they're not expecting it.
And really, when they stopped the games and Billy spoke, people listened.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a great speaker. I had never met him before. I read a lot about him since. I would prefer it was somebody from our group and to have more people, but it went quite well, and they did listen. Everybody, every kid. There was not a sound.
That's
and it was, you know, to me it was quite powerful to watch him and observe the kids.
Now, I'd like to go to another, but you know, I mean, I've said, I don't know how many times, every one addict affects so many individuals. Now, you're all sitting here, but you all have families and people who are close to Courtney or Jacqueline, or all of them. Now, you're all here, and I see the way that you guys are all approaching. Doug, and I kind of know the answer to this, but why don't you, what's the rest of your family, what's their involvement in this? I know it doesn't go as deep as yours, but I know they are active.
Yeah. My wife has begun to come out a little bit and speak a little bit. Some of the television stuff or interviews that we've done, she's sat in on, and I think it's helping her a lot. Because initially after Courtney passed, she was very angry, and she had a real hard time with it. I mean, we both had a hard time with it, but I think the more that she comes out and tells Courtney's story, and tells, you know, the superstar she was instead of the addict that she was.
Right.
You know, that's the message my wife is trying to get out there.
Well, I do remember when we did our show with your family, because we had you and Pam and your other daughter.
Shannon.
Yeah. And Pam did, out of all of these, she did really still show a lot of anger. Yeah.
Now Shannon runs a flower shop, and she does a lot of the flowers for the funerals for these kids. And that's a hard job for her, you know, because she's still living with the loss of her sister. And she gets out there and she does a beautiful job. You know? And we also have a church service that we sponsor once a month at the First Baptist Church in Plastow. And they've both been, you know, a big help there. My wife makes a big pot of chili, and Shannon is in a great age group. She brings some of her friends in there, and we're actually reaching people and spreading awareness in a faith-based environment where we have active users and you know, people in recovery and parents that have lost some kids come there, and it's good to see them all mixed together in a non-stigma environment.
Right.
It's really.
And I've been to quite a few of those services. I don't even call them prayer things. I mean, they're just great get-togethers.
Yeah.
And it's the third Sunday?
Third Sunday of every month.
Third Sunday of every month, First Baptist Church in Plastown. And it's a great place to be, and you're right. I broke my diet, I eat the chili. Okay.
Did you? You started with dessert, though.
Jim, I know you're involved with Doug with that, and I know what Anne Marie's doing. Now, you also have another daughter?
Yes, Sarah.
Now, how is she adjusted to this whole thing? She just lost a sister.
Very, very hard for her. I mean, that's part of why she and her son, Chris, are not able to come to the Sunday service. Christopher, who's 19, says he would just break down.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to have him come just to see the other young kids that are there, just to let him know that everybody's on his side,
Yep.
and he's got plenty of support.
Right.
But he's just afraid he'll cry. I think at his age, he's afraid to see other people, see him cry. I don't blame him. Sarah, it's hard for her.
Right.
Okay. She gets involved in things, but she still remembers Jackie. She's got photographs, of course, all over. But if she starts to talk, she'll break down herself.
Right.
She was in with us on the interview that we do with the Tribune. One of those first interviews, and she cried most of the time. Okay. Not that we all did a little bit, but
Sure.
it's just harder for her to do that, to deal with.
So yeah, both of your kids have really had a very
It's hard.
difficult time still
Yes.
getting,
It's still.
which is understandable.
And of course, Sarah is worried about Christopher too.
Yeah.
Making sure he stays in with the good crowd,
Mm-hmm.
and is safe. I always said that to Jackie when she left: be safe
Yeah.
tonight. Okay. But
Gail, now, do you have other children? Or?
I do. Kelly was our youngest, and I have a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old.
So how, I mean, I know it's incredibly difficult for all of the family, but you're here and your husband brought you here. What about your kids? Have they shut themselves in, or are they working through it? Or?
One has and one hasn't.
Yeah.
My oldest has a difficult time talking about it. She doesn't like to go to the cemetery. It really upsets her.
Mm-hmm.
And then my middle daughter is very active. She goes to GRASP meetings.
Good.
She talks to a lot of kids on social media about the epidemic, and she shares Kelly's story. So she has been very, very outspoken about it. But my oldest daughter, she has a very difficult time.
Yeah, it's and everybody, it obviously takes a lot longer for some than others, but I mean, hopefully she will reach out eventually to GRASP or any kind of a group or any kind of activity to get involved pertaining to that. I really believe that if you're working with it like most everybody here does, you feel like you're fighting back a little bit, and I guess that helps a bit. Betsy, the rest of your family, I know you've been a ball of fire.
Well, my husband and I had to go for counseling, obviously, after Chris initially died, because we just, it was like either that or we would have got divorced. But he can't speak, he
Right.
stays in the background. And my older two, Chris was the baby, they were so far ahead of him that when he was home and he was using, there was more fights. I mean, the police were at my house more often. It was very confrontational when he was around when they were younger. And
But how are they?
So I think-
I mean, do they have any kind of guilt now that he's gone?
not really. I mean, it's hard to say. Like the oldest, I mean, he's still, there's a lot of hard feelings there still. Like now we talk about him, it's like when he was younger, before he used. I mean, I think they hold. My oldest son, I think, holds. He's angry at him still, somewhat. My
Yeah, that-
daughter is more. Wish she could have helped him. But there was quite an age difference
Yeah.
between them. But I mean, the oldest is, I was still, I think, angry.
Yeah, I've heard that, of other people that have come in, that they do hold on to that anger for quite some time, unfortunately.
just-
Hopefully, eventually, they switch the anger from the person to the epidemic or the disease or whatever like
But
that.
it tears the family apart
Yeah.
when they're actively using.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Libby, what about your family members? How are they adjusting?
I have a son who's 20. He's a junior in college. And I think the first 6 months he maybe dealt with it a little bit initially, the shock and just grief. But then when he went back to school in the spring, I think he was just trying to do everything to block it out. And it was later, I think in the summer, that it started to catch up with him somewhat. And this fall he struggled a bit. I
Yeah.
mean, he was doing fine in school, but we became closer overall of this anyway. I'm divorced, and so we stay in touch. We're very, close in terms of communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think he worked through a lot of that this fall, so he seems better in terms of, I don't know. For a while, I mean, he almost became like a homebody, which was totally unusual for him.
Yeah.
He was coming home a lot on the weekends and not seeing his other friends, but that's changed.
My boss over there just told me we have 12 minutes left. And what I would like to do, and to me, this is probably about the most important part of the show, and I'm going to start with you, Joyce. I'd like you to look at the camera, and I'd like you would just like you were talking to some parents that are sitting on the couch with their 8, 10, 12-year-old kids, and tell them what this is all about. Tell them what they should be doing.
Tell the parents?
Tell the parent what they can, tell the parent if this can happen to them.
Well, I never thought this could happen to my family, and I've since learned that this can happen to anyone's family. Jeff was not someone, I mean, when you see, this is the picture of my son Jeff and his son. He wasn't your stereotypical person that you picked out that you would say was a heroin addict. And Jeff was a middle child, and he always gave us a little bit of a run for our money. Always a good kid, but my other kids did very well in school, and he was challenging, so to speak. And I think I think that I always knew he was a bit of a risk taker, so to speak. And I think, just like everybody has discussed, it's kind of looking for signs that I don't think I knew then that I do know now, even initially. I mean, we struggled as to where we were going to send him to high school. And at the time, he went in, we lived in Dracut, and it was either Dracut High, Central Catholic, or it was going to be Greater Lowell Voc. And we seemed to think that he wouldn't go to school in the same traditional way, so we chose Greater Lowell. And it doesn't matter, I've decided what school your child goes to, because there's good friends and bad friends and whatever, but I think you have to watch the children and the people that they choose to hang around.
Okay, so basically, and that's wonderful advice. Basically, you're telling the parents, watch what they're doing, look for changes, so forth.
Look at their eyes, watch when they know where they are.
Yeah.
I think we have to know where and I prided myself on knowing where my children were, but apparently I missed something. And those are the
Didn't we
things
all?
that I struggle with every single day. What and where did I miss something?
Okay.
And I did everything in my power.
All right,
My family did
And
everything.
another thing you bring up, the education is out there a lot more now than it was in the past. Doug, what would you tell Susie Q sitting on the couch?
Well, I think I would tell them to talk to their kids all the time. Talk about it. Say the word heroin. Talk it out loud. Show them the articles in the paper. Show them the kids that are dying. Talk about it. Ask them about their friends. Make sure you know their friends. Get them in your house. Look them in the eye. And don't be afraid to talk about it. And if you want to get involved, if you have questions, come to the MVP ASAP meetings, you know.
Hey, good. About time one of you guys put the plug in there.
We also started a company called Project Recovery in southern New Hampshire,
Right.
And we will be opening a women's sober house.
Wonderful.
And people like Jim and his family are willing to help us and do some fundraising and stuff, and it's, get involved, you know. If you don't know what's going on, it's your fault.
All right, Jim, you take the other lady on the other couch.
Okay, you know, I reiterate a lot what Doug said. Listen, talk, see what they're doing. Watch their behavior, see what they're doing. You know, is the behavior a little bit different? Don't be afraid to talk, don't be afraid to confront them. I think that when Jackie died, my wife was the bold one who mainly put in the paper what she died of. She died of heroin. Heroin. How often do you see when someone who's 18, 22, 21 died quietly, died silently, you know, passed away in the hospital? You know probably why they died, because of heroin or some other drug. Don't be afraid to talk about it. You know, let them know what's going on. And again, let the kids know that you're aware of what they're doing, okay? And try and help them out. Tell them you're going to help them out. And again, see who they're hanging around with or what they're doing, and just you know, be aware. Be aware of what's going on. Okay. I think that someone mentioned before that since Jackie died in 2014, since then there's been a plethora of information out there in the newspaper, whatever. So you know what's going on much more than you did 2 or 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, you do.
Okay?
Absolutely.
And I believe Anne Marie was one of the first ones to put in the paper that she died of heroin. And you were one of the first people to reach out to me as soon as you saw that in the newspaper. And I couldn't talk for a couple of months. You know, I just couldn't do it. So I didn't reach out to you right away. But you've got to do that. You've got to let people know. Put it in the paper, let people know. Talk to your friends.
All right, Gail, we got time for one more. What are you going to tell the people at home?
I think I would tell them to just stay close to your children, talk to them, notice things like if their friends are changing, if their grades are slipping in school, things are changing with their normal activities. And talk to your children, and, you know, don't be silent about it, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, and we should all, you know, talk to our kids, let them know the dangers, and let them know what it's like for us parents to live without our loved ones. You know, it changes our lives forever. And
Oh, yeah. Well, we got a couple extra minutes, so you both get to tell the parents what you want to tell them.
Well, previously what they said too, my son died in 2013, and we did put in the paper what he died of, and I had no funeral at the time because I couldn't. And then I felt, I have a whole shoebox full of letters I got from people at the time. Everyone was hiding in the closet. Now people are coming out and finally admitting we all have a problem.
Sure.
And before it was like, everyone was talking about your child behind your back, and we all knew he was using everyone else did, but no one would say it to your face. Now it's like, what can I do to help you? Back then it was you kept it to yourself.
Right.
And I'm glad it's coming out. All the help anyone can get to save them from going through this
Right. It
is
is
what I
out there.
want. And I just want to help somebody.
Libby, real quick, tell the people
Yeah.
at home.
Similar thoughts, but I mean, my daughter in high school did not drink. You know, she was the one that, oh, why aren't you going to the party with your friends? Well, Mom, if I went, I'd be like holding people's hair while they got sick, you know. So don't think that just because your child can start out one way in high school, that things can't change. And the education in high school, maybe they aren't tempted to do anything, but afterwards, I mean, they're exposed to so many things in college. And this on campuses, I know of a couple families where that's where their kids started using heroin, was in college. So just got to be vigilant.
You know, I know I got a couple of minutes, so obviously I want to thank you all for coming here. Doug and I were thinking about doing something like this, I don't know, almost a year ago now, and I'm so glad that I got you people to represent your children in the wonderful way that you have tonight. We are going to publicize this, and we're going to promote it, and I want to with the help of the Tribune, our good friends down there. I want as many people to see this as possible, and I'm so hopeful that, like I say, a goal that Doug and I have had for quite some time is to start reaching out to those who haven't been affected. So to you, those of you who haven't been affected, I want you to look at these people, all right? These people who, I wish I'd never met any of them, in all honesty. I wish I never met any of you. But now that I have, I love each and every one of you. We don't want to see anybody at home have to go through what these people are going through and will continue to go through for the rest of their lives. There's a lot of education out there. Come see it at MVP ASAP. Find out what's going on. Like they all said, talk to your kids. Learn yourself. Don't minimize. Please, when your kid's 13, 14 years old and they're drinking or they're doing a little weed or whatever, don't say it's only weed. They're too young. Pay attention. Don't minimize. Take it serious. Please. I don't want to interview people like this anymore, and I don't want 10 years from now to be, 10 years from now wouldn't be bad, I'd still be alive, so it ain't too bad. But in 10 years from now, I don't want to be filling up. Take a look at these pictures.
Yeah, just wanted to-
Take a look at these pictures. Do they look like drug addicts? Were they born to be addicts? No. These people are going to hurt and suffer forever, but they are the most courageous people I know because they're here and they're working and they're trying to educate everybody at home. So with that, again, you all have my deepest, deepest gratitude for being here, for making the awareness come around, and for the relationship that I have developed with many of you and will continue to develop with those that I hadn't yet. So on behalf of me and my really very special guests, I'd like to thank you all. I hope you'll listen to what they have to say, and we'll see you next month on the Empty Chair. Thank you.